good transition into the next point about the marketability of modern football and the lack of borders. So our next thing we wanted to talk about was that La Liga have announced that they will be playing a game. That's all we've heard at this point, a game in the US.
One single game for each team, or just one game?
And they've also guaranteed that it won't be a Clásico, but they haven't said whether it would involve either Real or Barca. And they announced that around a week ago. There's been a lot of discussion about how this is related to this 39th round that the Premier League wanted to play in the US. And the latest news is that last night, all of the captains of the La Liga teams issued a statement saying that they don't support it and they want to protest it. So it's, I guess, what we'd like to talk about is just the extent to which this is a good idea, or maybe even if it's necessary in modern football, and whether or not do you think it should be implemented?
I mean, I think just the marketing, the brand, the business is such a huge part of modern top flight football. It's you can't divorce the two. If you want to see players, I mean, nobody wants to see players like Neymar go to do a transfer for over 200 million euros. But the fact of the matter is it's happening. And those numbers need to be made up somewhere. And there's some very smart people, at least some very rich people. We don't want to confuse the two. There's some very rich people who are making that bet that over the term of Neymar's contract and his career, that could very well be worth it. And the question is, how do you make up those numbers? I would argue that it's by exploring new markets. It's getting new fans for the game, for those individual teams, and so I think it's very much part of the game. For example, Arsenal used to do training camp in Austria, up in the mountains, and it was a place that was perfect for team bonding. It was a place that was perfect for the ideas of the coach to bed in, get some clean mountain air, and get your diet straight. And now preseasons are characterized by friendlies in Asia, America, Australia, and all sorts of new markets. And that's for the Premier League, but for every big club that's ambitious, that preseason isn't only about getting fit and getting to know your teammates.
Yeah, I think that's now the standard. And what has happened by virtue of that is it kind of develops this different class system in football. So you'll have the International Champions Cup, and no matter how Manchester United go in the previous season, they could finish 10th, or like Chelsea did, 2 years ago, and they're still part of these tours and these huge money-generating tours, whereas a club like Leicester, who might play really well for one season,
the league, yeah.
And then they don't have these same opportunities. And I think that that's an unfortunate consequence of it. I mean, and if Fulham decide to do a tour of Australia, they're not going to sell out 90,000 seat venues like Chelsea and Liverpool do. People have been really upset about this La Liga decision, and it's, I guess, very against many of the traditions in European football. But to me, it doesn't seem to be, particularly if it doesn't feature either of Real Madrid and Barcelona, I think that it could be good for the rest of the league. You've got this NFL game they play every year in London, which has brought exposure to the game and has ended up growing the game there. Last year, you had the first British-born Super Bowl winner, wearing the Union Jack, walking down the field after the game. So I think it could be possible. And just from a selfish point of view, the Premier League is growing and growing, and you have a situation where a guy like Andre Schürrle, who was playing at the second best club in Germany, will be bought on loan to a very low, recently promoted club into the Premier League. And with the money growing and growing in the Premier League, because they have got this international presence, which a lot of the other leagues don't have, I don't want it to be a situation where you have basically one team in each of the European leagues, or even no teams that are at that level, with the German league and the Italian league, French league going the way of the Dutch league. And I think that by doing this, I would prefer them playing a game in the US once a year or even around there. I would prefer that than having more and more billionaire owners coming in and buying teams.
I'm down with that, but you have to argue that, number one, it's not healthy for the players to have such a long flight and then play in a completely different time zone and get back on the plane and then come back. Number two, it's not really a football decision, and as much as we mentioned that the game has to take in marketing and business sides into account, and growing the game and developing a new generation of fans. I think it's seen as a cheap move, and it's seen as like an inevitable output, inevitable result of the amount of money that's in the game. And secondly, if it ends up being a Clásico, I don't think it helps La Liga as much as it could.
No.
So, for example, if it was a Madrid derby, or if it was, Madrid-Sevilla, or Barcelona-Sevilla, or Valencia, or one of these like top half, top 5, top 6 clubs, I think it would do much more justice, because what is Barcelona Madrid? Like that's an advertisement for both those clubs, as well as maybe the Champions League. It's not necessarily creating interest for people who will pay a bunch of extra money every season for so that the broadcast rights will have consistent usage for games that are not the Clásico.
That's right. I mean, the Clásico is already bigger than the Super Bowl in terms of world watching, world viewers, by far. And by adding whatever, 100 million to that, or however much you would want to add, I don't know how much it really, really helps out the league. And this is the league decision. And as it stands, Barcelona and Madrid aren't in any trouble anyway. So I would like to see it with some of the old traditional clubs. Maybe a team from the Basque region taking on Sevilla, something like that. But I don't think it's good for anyone except Real Madrid and Barcelona if that was to be the idea, although that would be the hottest ticket in football. If they play that game in, and it's a
competitive game.
If it's a competitive game and they're playing it in Miami, which is where they suggested it, it'll be a huge deal. And but I don't think this benefits the league as a whole. And we're an already very imbalanced league.
I think it benefits on balance, after reviewing all the different aspects. I do think it benefits the league as long as it's not a Clásico.
Yeah, that's I would say so. And I think that the world is more international now. We are increasingly borderless, and that's a great way to grow the profile.
And Miami makes a ton of sense because I think it's only like a 5 or 6 hour time difference. It is in a part of the country which has a huge Hispanic influence, and therefore, like watching the Spanish league and watching in Spanish with Spanish commentary, or even with English commentary, there's a bit more of an emotional connection.
Definitely. And time-wise, I mean, clubs do fly and play in Russia in the Champions League midweek and come back and play in their league on the weekend. So, I mean, it's not ideal, but I think that it might not be the worst, particularly if they are playing on the East Coast. I mean, that's another thing that I didn't realize until I was in the US last year, how big that place is. Yeah. That it's 5 hours from New York to California. I never knew that. No one told me that. But so I think that is a concern. That's also part of the deal. If you decide to pursue that game and then it costs you form in La Liga, then that's a decision the club's made, and you've got to take it on balance whether you think it's.
And so, if you're Sergio Ramos or you're one of these other captains, why are you worried?
I think you're worried because this is the beginning of something that could turn into. Maybe they play one round, maybe they play 5 rounds, maybe we don't get any more home games. I mean, this is this concern that if you become a global brand, but if you've lost the support in your hometown, I mean, what is football about? And I understand that traditionalist argument, but I think a lot of these players, the moment that a big club comes calling that'll double their weekly wage, they'll go there, and that's also a part of the commercialization of the league. So I understand their concerns. And if player power wins and the result is that they don't change the structure at all, I think it's all for the best. It the players are incredibly important in the game, and they should serve as a counterpoint against rampant commercialism. But I do think that if it was done well, and that's a big question.
But Sergio Ramos and Messi are not confused about this. They know that they, number one, are global superstars in their own right, and number two, represent even bigger institutions that long ago transcended any national boundaries, and that's seen through the Champions League on a competitive basis, but also in terms of preseason, in terms of the amount of tourism it generates, the amount of economic activity it generates. So I think they shouldn't be naive about this, but I can certainly understand their concerns because there's a lot of factors involved.